So, very briefly, my name is Santiago Cimadevilla, as brilliantly pronounced by my announcer. I'm a bandoneon player, arranger, and composer as well. I was born in Argentina. I live in Holland already for a very long time, and I studied bandoneon actually in Holland as well, in Rotterdam, at Codarts. And for the last few years, I've been myself involved there as a teacher. I'm a teacher of a number of subjects, and I'm an artistic research coach. And what I will show you now is a little overview of the research I did during my master's. And by doing this, I also will try to give you a little bit of an insight into how we conduct artistic research at Codarts. I'll try to move quickly through it because I've got a strict timekeeper. Maybe during the questions I can clarify whatever wasn't explained enough. In our research, we start, of course, with an artistic research question, which is the device we use in order to focus the research of the students and to keep the goal in mind. The research question has to explain the goal of the research, what it is that the student wants to achieve, and also the means by which to achieve it. In this case, as you can see, I wanted to develop a personal way of playing bandoneon solos. I will define in a little moment what these bandoneon solos actually are. And I explain also the way I want to go about achieving this goal. In my case, it was by studying the styles of a certain number of master performers. So what are these bandoneon solos that I'm talking about? Bandoneon solo is basically the elaboration of a melody. It's something which happens through a number of devices such as ornamentation, development, and variation. An important point is that the bandoneon solo is a variation of a melody, one of the melodies of a composition, which usually has already been introduced in the piece previously, so the listener already knows this melody. And the variation takes this melody as the starting point, and this melody has to be recognizable. Even though these are very highly developed variations, the original melody, what I call the structural melody in my research, has to always be recognizable. You can always hear the link between the variation and the original melody. Another important thing is that these solos, in contrast to most of tango music, which is basically notated in tango, especially in ensemble tango pieces, we work with highly detailed arrangements which show in very clearly what each instrument has to play. But the solos are not written down. The moment the solo is played, the arranger usually will just write the basic structural melody, and it's up to the performer to take that melody and make something interesting out of it. The solos are different every time. In my research, I found that when analyzing performers throughout time, they play in general lines the same thing, or there are sometimes like lines of development. They develop through time a certain elaboration of a solo, but they never play exactly the same. There is always an element of spontaneity and a little bit of improvisation, so no two solos are the same. And the most important thing is that a bandoneon solo is one of the means to express the personality of the performer. In tango music, as a popular music style, the personality is very, very important. The style of the performer is very important. It's actually, if you look at the big names in tango history, they are more known by their style than by their compositions. Actually, tango orchestras would usually play composition. I mean, they would play any number of compositions, not only those of the orchestral conductor. They would play basically anything, but they would play it in their own style. The style is defined by three main aspects: the arrangement that is being played, the way the arrangement is being played, so not just the note, but how these notes are interpreted, in which there is a high degree of possibilities. And third is the way the solos are played, which was the subject of my research. To give you an example of what these solos are, as I said before, a solo is a development of a melody. Often this melody will have been introduced by another instrument, usually the violin, but not always. And as an example, we can take this piece of Argentinian composer Astor Piazzolla, and his most famous piece is called Adios Nonino. And I will show you now the first 8 bars of the melody of the B theme, the slow theme, as played by the violin during the first introduction. So as you can hear, the score that you see is a score as provided by the arranger or by the publisher, and the violin player plays basically what's written. There is some freedom, of course, in color and in timing and rubato, but the notes are pretty much what you see there. Later on in the piece, the bandoneon takes over the theme and plays a different version of this, so his own elaboration of this theme. In the next slide, I will show you this. You can hear Astor Piazzolla playing this same solo, and you will hear the solo, and you will see a transcription of myself of this same solo. But keep in mind that the notes that the performer has in front of him are these same notes that you see here. So it's pretty different, and my question was, how can I do this? I mean, you get a score which looks like this, and you want it to sound like this. It's difficult, right? So my goal was not to play, of course, that, but to learn how this works. How does the performer think, and how does he come up with these sort of elaborations? We move on to the way I organize my research. This is a little bit of a general impression of how we organize research at Codarts. One of the most important things is the intervention cycle. It's the way we use to keep track of each step of the research and how we keep track of progress. We start an intervention cycle with a reference recording, which is supposed to record the way the performer did his thing before starting the research. My reference recording was a performance of this same piece of Adiós Nonino in the year 2006, way before I even started to think consciously about how to, or before I had any tools to come up with these elaborations. You can see below on the upper staff the score I got from the arranger. This is a structural melody. There are almost no embellishments, no elaborations. And below that, I did a transcription of my own performance. The notes in red are the differences between what I played and the score I received. And this is how it sounds like. So after confronting myself with this recording, I did an assessment of it and a reflection, and I checked with my network. And these are my conclusions. Basically, this is just not what a bandoneon solo is supposed to be like. This is really not it. But it's what I could do back then with the means that I had at my disposal. So how did I accomplish this research? I did a number of transcriptions, approximately 20 to 30 fragments of recordings. I analyzed these transcriptions and I conducted interviews with experts. One of the things which helped the most was to take the same piece, and so many recordings of the same piece by the same performer, to be able to compare them. This is a selection of my own transcriptions of this same solo of Adiós Nonino, and you can see that the upper two staffs are show the melody as you can find it in the score. the structural melody. And then I put right after each other transcriptions of live recordings of Astor Piazzolla, and you can see that they vary a lot, of course, but when you listen to them, you can hear a general line. What I did here, I looked after doing these transcriptions in the analysis, I looked for recurring elements, so devices, means of making variations that he would use, which I would find across many pieces and across many recordings. And then once I identified them, you can see them in brackets. I isolated each melodic device, and then I went on to analyze them. I found a lot of things, not only in Piazzolla, but in many performers. This is the way I worked. I would find, for instance, if you look at the fourth bar, one of the devices that I found, I called it a pivot notes. It's a way of reaching a melody of a note of the structural melody by means of pivoting or leaning on a note which is foreign to the original melody. In this case, the example shows how to get to the E note from the F natural, which is in the fourth bar. What you see now is the original score. What you see here is a transcription of Piazzolla playing this in 1984. So it's about getting from, I'll just play the whole fragment, so we have. So it's about getting from the F to the E. It looks very simple here. He does just put a B there and move from the B to the E. But as you can see, there are many variations on this. In 1983, he plays the F, and then he does a gruppetto or a turn on the pivot note. It's about ways of finding, adding things to the melody. A more elaborated version, this is about getting from the same E to the E in the last bar. So we have same note again, and he plays. By isolating all these little things, I could start to make sense of how these solos worked. I also put these things in context, so I tried to see a relation between these and the composer style, and things they would do in other recordings, things masters from the past would do. And then I'll show you a little bit about the results which I came up with. What I did while doing this research, I made conscious choices as to things which I wanted to do in my performance, but many things happened also spontaneously, just by knowing about it and by trying things out. I'm lucky that I play live a lot, so I could really experiment. And I came up with, I found myself doing some of these things in different places, and I found myself doing things which I would not hear in the original performance. For instance, this is a fragment of another piece of Piazzolla. I'll show you I'll play for you the original melody, the structural melody. That's please look at the score fragment on the bottom, repetitive pedal note, and I'll play the upper staff, which is the structural melody. So this is the score that we get from the arranger. And this is about moving from the second to the third bar. If you look at the notes in red, this is similar to a similar idea as that of the pivot note which I showed before, but I repeat it over and over. So it sounds like this. This is just one example, but I found a lot of this sort of thing. This is a result of how I performed this same piece, Adios Nonino, after my research. Actually during my research, but already 1 year into it. This is what I could do after studying all these aspects. I play the same piece, and it sounds a bit different than my reference recording. On the bottom, you can see the structural melody. This is the score I received, and what you can hear is what I actually played. Yeah, I didn't say anything about why do this through research. I mean, this way of playing is something that performers from Argentina, not all of them, but the best ones, they do this. I mean, they don't have to do research. But then again, they were born and they grew up in this musical culture. You get this stuff when you are constantly among other bandoneon players playing in orchestras. It can take, I don't know, 20, 30 years. I started later, I work in Holland, and I needed a way to rationalize this, to be able to move a bit quicker and to get this stuff through conscious thought. One last thing about how we work at Codarts, and I found it interesting related to the theme of this conference, because it's about the artistic practice as the source and the target, and this is what we try to accomplish there. I mean, there has to be a result like this. I'm not saying this is just a beginning. I'm still working, of course, and I will always be working on my performance, but there is a measurable result between the beginning of the research and the end. So this is always what we try to emphasize, and what we do during artistic research presentations. You have to show that what you researched led to a change in your way of performing. With that, I can close my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.